Hello, friends and members of the Baton Rouge chapter of the Louisiana Archaeological Society. For those of you who don't know me or have yet to put a face to the name behind the many emails, my name is Brandy Kerr, and I'm currently serving as a co-president for the Baton Rouge chapter of the Louisiana Archaeological Society. My co-president, Margot Murray Batts, couldn't make it today, but worry not, she will be here in the future. So, with the shutdowns that are happening right now, Margot and I have been reaching out to other archaeological societies to get an idea of how they've been handling their meetings given the situation. So in an effort to continue providing you with a little archaeology, we've decided to move to virtual meetings. So these will consist of presentations approximately 15 to 30 minutes long with a brief interview at the beginning with our speaker. These recordings will be made available on YouTube. We will provide the link to you in the monthly emails reminding you of the meeting. So on the last Wednesday of every month, we will have these virtual meetings available for you until it's safe again to resume in-person meetings in a conference room situation. So before I get started, let me give you a little background on this presentation. It's based off of a paper I wrote for Dr. Heather McKillop's Maya seminar class during the spring of 2019. I additionally presented it at the South Central Conference on Mesoamerica back in October of 2019. So some of you may already be a bit familiar with it. In the future, our presentations will likely be more focused on ongoing and past field excavations rather than the more academic-centric topic that you're going to hear today. Regardless, we wanted to be able to give y'all a little something for this month, so without further ado, let's get started. And please bear with me with some of the pronunciation of these places and names. It can be a little difficult for me to do. So let's see. All right. So gender studies are fundamental to understanding and recreating the social organization of ancient societies. Various communal roles are identified and labeled as inherently male or female, and analysis of these in the ancient world of the Maya provides the opportunity to examine the dynamics of male and female relations. In this presentation, I argue that communities recognize the power of women and their status in the production of ritualistic artifacts, as well as their influence in politics. I begin with a discussion of women's work within the domestic sphere of the Maya. Next, I turn to the Maya religion to analyze the roles of female deities, expressly the First Mother, known by many names, but referred to in this presentation primarily as the Moon Goddess. Iconography of women as warriors, rulers, and mothers to kings will follow to demonstrate the importance placed on the matrilineal line of royals that is seemingly overshadowed by the overabundance of documentation of the male lines. In conclusion, I provide an analysis of the role of women in ritualistic ceremonies and the accompanying appropriation of female characteristics by males during such activities. I suggest that due to the limited instances of women represented in positions of power when compared to those of men, studies of the relationship between the sexes have suggested a dynamic of assumed suppression rather than one more indicative of equality. Arguably, the domestic sphere and women's work perpetuates an underlying implication of submission when analyzed within the gender division of labor. However, I posit such connotations were not, in fact, the result of oppression, but choice. Karen Bassie-Sweet agrees that ancient Maya women held a higher role in background activities than some scholars have acknowledged. She succinctly argues that, quote, while the actions of a man usually place him at the center of the public stage, his wife performs essential tasks that allow him to fulfill his obligations, end quote. Confinement in a domestic capacity was essential for Maya mothers to ensure the survival of the community. Due to lower life expectancy, as well as the high rates of childhood deaths, it's reasonable that women chose to remain closer to the home and engage in roles such as weavers, producers of food, and caretakers, considering the precarious medical and economic conditions of the time. These two concepts of life expectancy and child death were the reasons why a gender division of labor based on sex was established. Women, therefore, would produce more children to increase the chances of at least some surviving into adulthood. It would then stand to reason that women spent most of their time pregnant, lactating, or caring for young until they reached adulthood. A study of the classic period Maya by Cynthia Robin indicates that children survived anemia at a higher rate during this time than is seen today. So the choice of women to remain at the household to rear the children during a high rate of childhood death suggests that it was known that for survival, the highest chance for children to live to adulthood required constant watch. Miranda Stockett discusses the gendered role of males as, quote, by virtue of their larger size and physical freedom during the gestation, birthing, and nursing of their offspring, are able to take on activities that range more widely away from the home, including hunting, warfare, and politics. This dichotomy has often been assumed to be an oppressive, submissive dynamic. However, I believe this is a westernized interpretation and did not manifest as such within Maya societies. In addition to the role of the mother, Susan Kellogg states that, quote, Maya women helped prepare ritual offerings of food, textiles, and incense, end quote. Although some have considered women's work inherently submissive chores, within a community so entrenched in the symbolism and importance of ritualistic activities, it's clear to me that by putting women in control of artifact production, there existed a great trust and reverence. Carolyn Tate draws attention to the relationship between women and water by using the example of the moon goddess's connection to bodies of water. She cites the belief held by the Cachiquel in Panajachel that the moon goddess owns Lake Atitlan. She additionally references the long-standing tradition of women offering their choicest weaving creations to the goddess by releasing them into the lake. Turning now to pottery creation, it's important to understand the process. Clay and water are gathered from the earth to construct the vessels. Such an interaction with the natural elements of the earth would have been significant to the ancient Maya. The formation of pottery emulates grinding corn, much like the mythical First Mother who formed the human race through the grinding and molding of corn dough. So, women engaging in pottery production can be considered an act of ritualistic worship in and of itself. The iconography of the Maya included images of women engaged in what Julia Hendon refers to as creating, quote, culturally valued and economically significant products through the transformation of natural resources into the food and textiles necessary for subsistence and ritual, end quote. This further emphasizes the connection between women and the natural earth. The parallels between the gendered activity of Maya women and the moon goddess indicate a pretty clear connection of women to the highly revered female deity of creation. The moon goddess is the wife of the sun in Maya mythology, who is revered for her connection to the earth as the patroness of weaving and creation, as well as childbirth and medicine. As the creator of human beings, the reference of the moon goddess suggests that a woman's role as a mother is understood to be both spiritual and ritualistic, and is explicitly linked to the earth and cyclic events. I contest that the moon goddess contained powers surpassing other deities due to her role as the creator of humans, as well as her connection to the earth and its cycles, and was thus held in high regard to both men and women equally. Known by several names, including Goddess Ai, Ishel, and Chakshel, and depicted in a variety of forms, the moon goddess has remained a central figure in Maya mythology. A typical depiction during the classic period presents her with a rabbit in her arms and seated on the moon. During the post-classic period, she's often associated with weaving activities. She is additionally often depicted in the act of childbirth or with a child in hand. The ancient Maya religion was known to associate women with caves, blood, and water, all of which are symbolic of fertility and rebirth. The moon goddess is known to influence the cyclic events of the earth, sun, and moon. In the Codex Borgia, for example, a mural depicts the moon goddess with marine shells within waves of seawater with a symbol of a moon encircling her. This not uncommon illustration serves to connect women to the moon's cycles and phases, which were thought to control the waters of the sea, usually as a form of rebirth or regeneration. The Maya believed the link to the phases of the moon indicated times of successful planting. The moon goddess is a symbol of the continuous human cycle, which is represented in the 260-day Maya calendar. Tate argues this is specifically important because, quote, its length approximates 9 lunations and the human gestation period, end quote. According to Quiche myth, the moon, or the first mother, is a woman pregnant with maize. The moon's husband, the sun, locates a cave for his wife to give birth. The cave is henceforth known as a house of birth and becomes a storehouse for the maize seeds born of the moon. The moon must then spread her maize seed offering over the earth. Not only are the phases of the moon significant for sowing and successful harvesting, but it appears that the work of the moon kept her close to her domestic sphere, the cave. This mentality could be partially responsible for the choice of Maya women to spend their time within their own domestic space. The appearance of men in ancient Maya iconography certainly surpasses that of women, who were generally presented as royal wives, mothers to kings, or as deities on monumental structures. It's been argued there is an inherent bias that is formed around gender roles, especially ancient Maya women, due in part to their limited appearance in hieroglyphic inscriptions. Despite their limited depictions, one thing is clear. The Maya placed importance on the matrilineal line of royals and rulers. The inclusion of iconographic depictions of royal women is one example of the apparent authority placed on the matrilineal line of the royal Maya. Lowell Gustafson posits that due to the inherent danger of childbirth, the significance of the role of women in producing a descendant was of extreme importance to all people within these societies. This acknowledgement of the matrilineal line was crucial in the justification of dynamic succession for at least some of the male rulers. Considered to be the greatest ruler of the late classic period, Lady Kaabel ruled at El Peruwaka with her husband, Kinich Balam, for at least 20 years. She was a military governor carrying the title Kalumte, which translates to supreme warrior, placing her even higher in status than her husband, the king. Within her burial, a vessel was encountered. It was carved into the form of a conch shell with a head and arms extending from the openings, depicting an older female. Ethnographic research suggests this vessel belonged to Lady Kaabel. Another highly studied relief is lintel 24 at Yaxchilan, which depicts the Lady Shak engaging in sacrificial bloodletting by pulling a barbed cord through her tongue. Tate points out that the contemporary Maya of Chimaltenango believe they retain multiple souls, including a soul directed to the community called Tenalo, located in the blood. The acute physical act of bloodletting serves as a depiction of one with an enduring Tenal, which works to bind the moral soul of the community. With all this evidence in their interpretations, one could argue the spiritual rituals carried out by Lady Shak were considered necessary to ensure the prosperous reign of Shield Jaguar, who is illustrated alongside Lady Shak on lintel 24. Of particular intrigue are the possible implications of her upward gaze. I concur with Tate's assessment that this upward glance is more closely associated with the personification of the spiritual relationship of Lady Shak and the moon goddess, rather than the oft-assumed submission to male oppression. Lady Shak's position suggests a possession of spiritual power strong enough to influence the political structure of the entire community. Studies of iconographic depictions of women holding bundles have yielded several theories as to what was kept within. In considering the ritualistic nature of their depictions, these bundles are thought to have contained artifacts used in ceremonies. Items such as incense and other prayer offerings were central to Maya ritual and were often provided by women. The relief on lintel 25 is another depiction of Lady Shak, this time with the vision serpent, which solidifies her power and connection to the cosmological divination. Here, we see her holding a sacred bundle, which has been suggested to represent the insurance of the successful reign of Shield Jaguar. Her hieroglyphic title, Shahom, translates to scatterer of incense, after all. Her position on the ground below him is another source of debate among scholars. Some interpret her positioning as one of submission. However, I'm more inclined to side with Tate's analysis that because women within the gendered cosmos of the Maya tended to, quote, relate to qualities that are physically lower, colder, wetter, and more constant than those of males, and perceived as assistants to males, female spiritual practices, including offerings of prayer and incense to the staffs of office and the ancestors, were fundamental to the spiritual and hence political success of the male office holder. One of the most intriguing female figures in Maya iconography, Lady Jacques, ruled in Palenque beginning in AD 612 and is depicted on the Oval Palace tablet. Although evidence suggests she only spent 3 years as the ruler outright until her son, Pakal, assumed the role of king, many have assumed she retained a powerful position in Palenque until her death in AD 640. Unprecedented in documented Maya history, on the Oval Palace tablet, Lady Jacques is seen holding the royal headdress in an act of passing rulership to her son, Pakal. Even more symbolically, the headdress, the source of political power, is facing her. This iconographic depiction indicates Lady Jacques held significant influence in the accession of the king, and likely continued to hold power during his reign, possibly even ruling alongside him. The accumulation of power is a fundamental feature in establishing inequality and oppression. Many times, this is done through the appropriation of powerful symbols already in existence and held by other groups of people. One example among the ancient Maya is the ritual of bloodletting, most often carried out by men through perforation of the genitals. Jennifer Dornan argues that the performance of said ritual was an attempt to retain the ability of women to mysteriously bleed for days without dying and to bring human beings into existence. Such are powerful abilities men do not possess, which could be threatening to the male power. Tate argues that to better communicate with the deities as a woman does, perhaps a similar symbolic act was required by males. To continue the line of accession, as women do through childbearing, the act of genital bloodletting was a way to maintain fertility in men. Thus, women were central to spiritual engagements as agents maintaining the political power of men. All that being said, I do not believe men within the ancient Maya world were attempting to sequester the power of women in an endeavor to bend them into submission. Instead, I think that men revered the power of women and desired to possess their extraordinary abilities in tandem, thus creating a complementary relationship indicative of equality. Despite the ample evidence in existence of the moon goddess and her link to lunar cycles, Brockquist goes further by stating, quote, the phases of the moon, which are seen by the Mayas as a changing tilt of a lunar jar, are connected to rainfall as well as to the menstrual cycle, end quote. This argument suggests a connection to cycles, and specifically cycles of menstruation, to times of successful rainfall and crop yield. Perhaps the most notorious of the Maya mythological gods is the corn god. Although my study's focus has been almost exclusively on the moon goddess, I wish to draw attention to the similarity of attire and depictions of a royal male and a royal female as the corn god and the moon goddess. The implication of comparable garb is significant due to the suggestive nature of equality. Evidence of both males and females in the same clothing while performing rituals has been identified and furthers the notion that one gender did not dominate the other, but that one could not exist without the other. Additionally, costume and clothing choices by men suggest some degree of female appropriation. One example is the wearing of the huipil, which is a tunic generally worn over a skirt during public occasions. During ceremonial rituals, the huipil was known to be, quote, richly embroidered with an overall pattern and edged with cords and fringes, end quote. Although females primarily wore it, during certain ceremonies, men would don them while engaging in ritualistic activities. Some argue that Maya kings would dress like women to demonstrate their ability to transcend gender boundaries and expose their feminine side. One such example is depicted on Stela 5 at Koba. With the ruling king depicted on one side of the monument and the ruling queen on the other, both figures dressed in the beaded net skirt associated with depictions of the corn god and the moon goddess engaging in ritual, the prevalence of gender complementarity among the Maya becomes evident. The 1980s brought about a call for archaeologists to shed their reliance on inserting their westernized and contemporary gender stereotypes to past societies. Whether intentional or not, this sparked the emergence of a much-needed re-examination of established studies of male and female relations. Tate smartly states, quote, "Like the moon, which is constantly present in both the day and the night, women's activities are fairly constant throughout the day and the year. In contrast, men's activities vary seasonally. Just before the rainy season begins and during the early months of the rainy season, they work intensely in their maize fields." In summation, based on the ample evidence of importance placed on the female line through depictions of women as deities, rulers, and mothers to kings, it's clear to me that women in the ancient Maya world were held in high regard. In fact, they were so highly revered, the argument can be made that men engaged in the appropriation of female characteristics to reach a higher level of spiritual connection to the deities as women were naturally able to do. So that's it for now. Thank you to everybody who tuned in today. We hope you enjoyed this brief reflection on how gender is perceived among the ancient Maya. We don't yet have next month's presentation nailed down, but we will definitely have something for you. So be on the lookout for future emails regarding upcoming meetings. And thanks everybody again for tuning in, and everyone stay well.